I'm Staci Bilbo. I am a professor of psychology and neuroscience and neurobiology and cell biology at Duke University, and I teach neuroimmunology.
What advice would you give to your undergraduate self?
The advice I would give would be to take more math classes. Um, not because I feel like those skills are necessarily lacking today. Obviously, we all need math, and it's essential for STEM fields. But actually, because I really enjoyed math, and at the same time, sadly, I was discouraged from taking math classes. I think girls often were not so long ago, and I sort of let that get to me and undermine my confidence and my courage. And at the same time, as I said, I really loved math, and so I think my advice to myself is not really anything to do with math, but rather it's advice to follow my interests, to take chances, even if it's hard, and to really invest in myself and just sort of see where that leads.
What does your research focus on?
It focuses on the topic of this chapter, which is the role of the immune system in the central nervous system. So how does the immune system basically talk to the brain? We care about this not just when we're sick or when there's an injury or infection, but all the time. So the recognition that the immune system is actually really critical for the way the brain functions. And we are particularly interested in a cell type called microglia, which are the resident immune cells of the brain. And they come into the brain very early in development. And they play really critical roles in how the brain develops. And so we're very interested in what we can learn about those interactions, and also the fact that often if their function is disrupted in brain development, then you can have very long-term consequences for brain and behavioral function later in life.
How did you choose your field of study?
I've been studying this for a very long time because I went to graduate school to work with Randy Nelson at Johns Hopkins, and he is a neuroendocrinologist. So he studies mostly how the brain interacts with the endocrine system and changes behavior. But when I arrived to his lab, I think it was my very first week of graduate school, he handed me a book called Why We Get Sick, which basically introduced the concept that when we are sick or have an injury, we often display very striking changes in our behavior, our motivation changes. But contrary to what was often believed, this is not some pathological consequence of the bug itself, for instance, if it's an infection, but rather our own immune system is changing our behavior. And I was just immediately hooked. I was immediately sort of captivated by this idea that there's a system entirely outside of the brain, which is constantly talking to the brain and impacting our behavior. So that's what I've studied ever since.
If you were not a neuroscientist, what would you do?
I took that question to really mean if I wasn't a scientist at all, what would I do? And I would either be an architect or an interior designer or both. I love design. I paint in my free time. So I love art. And I love houses. So I think I would really enjoy some element of designing both the sort of structural qualities of houses or structures, but also the design aspects.